Hi.
Hi, Jamuna. Can you
Yeah.
hear me clearly?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Okay, good. Yeah. Good to see you early, coming in early. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Can you see my screen also where it shows the recap for chapter 1?
Yes, can.
Yeah, okay. Today we will try out more questions from
Mm-hmm.
the past year paper because usually chapter 1 and chapter 2 are combined together. These are the
Sure.
questions from the exams. Yeah.
Sure.
So we'll do more of that in a while
Mm.
in lesson 2. And meanwhile, let's wait for the other classmates.
Mm.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay. Hi, Mandy. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear.
Okay. Yeah. Mandy is one of the staff at 100 Tuition. She came in to observe the lesson.
Oh, I see. Okay, okay.
I think there's another colleague coming in to observe the
Yep.
lesson also. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Mandy, can you? Okay, thanks. I was about to ask you to mute yourself, Mandy. Yeah, but okay, thanks. Okay, let's wait for another 2 minutes. Okay, let's start. The session is recorded. The the other students, they can watch the recording and also the class review.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Okay. Jamuna, are you able? Okay. Do you know? Are you aware that there's if you go, click on the past lesson, past class, you can see the class recording and the class review where you have the notes and the questions.
Oh, okay. I haven't checked that out yet, but I'll check it out later. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
You can see your past class and you just
Mm.
click in. Yeah, and you can see all this.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's start. Okay. Thanks. Okay, let's start. Okay, so just a quick recap what we learned the last lesson in chapter 1. So basically we learned about the characteristics of living organism, Mrs. Grant, right? MRS, GREN, where it's movement, respiration, sensitivity, growth, reproduction, excretion, and nutrition, right? And we also learned how do we classify, what is the classification system, right? The binomial system where organisms are classified into groups based on the shared features. And we also learn what is a species. A species is simply just a group that can breed to or that can reproduce to produce fertile offspring. Right? And we learn about the genus species, which is the naming convention for the binomial system. And we also learn about the dichotomous keys and the modern classification using DNA and the evolutionary relationships to group organism more accurately. And I think finally, we learn about the features of the organism, right? Where the organism can be divided into 5 kingdoms, basically the animals, plants, the fungi, the prokaryotes, the prototis, right? And specifically, we need to know in details that animals are grouped into vertebrates and invertebrates. And plants are divided into ferns and flowering, flowering plants. Okay. We also learned about virus, although virus is not a living organism, but because they are they will take over the host. So basically, virus will be included in the syllabus, and we just need to know virus is not a living organism. They only consist of a protein code and genetic material. Okay, that's the what we learned in chapter 1. So today in chapter 2, okay, so today in chapter 2, we will learn about how the um, organism, that means to understand the characteristics of the organism more deeply, we look into their cells, right? And basically, all living organisms are composed of cells, and cells are the basic units of life. Okay, so the learning outcome for today, there's 2 parts. One is the cell structures, and the other will be the magnification. Okay, so here first the cell structure. Right, first you need to be able to describe and compare the structure of a plant cell with an animal cell, right? And you need to identify in diagrams. So there'll be practice for you. Okay, and you need to know the cell wall, cell membrane, nucleus, the cytoplasm, the cytoplasm, the ribosomes, the mitochondria, and the velcros. Okay, and then next you are to describe the structure of the bacterial cell. You need to identify in diagrams, and it's only limited to cell walls, cell membranes, the cytoplasm, the ribosomes, the circular DNA, and the plasmids. Okay, hi, Darwin, right?
Hi, sir.
Hi, okay, welcome. Uh, are you able to turn on your camera? At least I can see your face for once. Yeah, then you can turn it
Turn
off.
on my camera.
Oh, it's not
I'm not
working, is
sure
it?
how, cause like there's no option for me to turn on my camera. I only
Okay.
saw while I'm joining only microphone can.
Okay, no worries. Yeah, I'll get the tech team to send you instructions how to maybe turn on the camera next time. No
Okay,
worries.
thank you.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Okay, we are just starting the class. So today we're lesson 2. So we are just going through the learning outcomes. So very quickly. So I just quickly read through, right? So knowing the comparing the plant cells with the animal cells and you're able to identify in diagrams. You're able to describe the structure of bacterial cell, and you need to identify in diagrams. Later we'll see. And then you'll be able to explain the functions of the major cell structures, right? And recognize their roles in living organisms. So we'll look at certain cells, and then we'll know their roles in living organism. Okay, and fourth, we identify the specialized cells, right? And we will relate their structures to their functions in the processes. And then finally, we will define and distinguish between the terms, the cells, tissues, organs, organ system, and organism, right? And we'll give you some examples. Okay, let's start formally in this lesson. Okay, this is just an introduction, how we studied the characteristics of living organism in chapter 1, and then now we want to understand these characteristics more deeply, and then we'll look at the cells. Okay. Okay, first, let's take a close look at the animal cell. Okay, they are, maybe let's focus on the diagram first. Okay, so you realize, I think animal cells, they have a nucleus, right? Okay, and basically nucleus is the organelle that holds all the genetic materials, right? And basically it's like our brain, the human brain, that controls the cell activities, right? So that's the nucleus. Okay, it holds all the genetic material, including DNA, and it controls all the cell activities, right? And usually nucleus will be the biggest organelle. Okay, organelle is simply just the substructure of a cell, right? Okay, so the organelle is the biggest organelle in a cell. Okay, another thing that's very obvious is you can see the outer structure, right? And this is the cell membrane, right? Later we'll see plants have cell walls, okay, but animal cells doesn't have, right? That's one main difference between plant cells and animal cells. Okay, and next, let's look at what is the cytoplasm. It's basically just a jelly-like structure, substance, right? And basically it contains nutrients, the source, and enzymes that's required for chemical reactions to take place. And that's the cytoplasm. Okay, so it's a jelly-like structure. So you don't see them as a structure. It's just a jelly-like. Okay, we go through cell membrane already, yes. And then we see there's this structure called the excuse me. Okay, the mitochondria. Okay, sorry, it's quite a bit tongue twisting. The mitochondria. Okay, you see that it has, okay, it has a structure. Okay, and what it does is it basically contains enzyme needed for respiration. So it's basically where respiration takes place in the cell. It's at the mitochondria. Okay, so the function, right, it is where respiration happens and where energy is released for the cell. Okay, this happens at the mitochondria. Okay, and another one, the last one for animal cells is the ribosomes. Okay, the ribosome, okay, is the place where the amino acid is synthesized into proteins. Right, it's where proteins are produced. Okay, and usually how do you know, or how do you differentiate between the mitochondria and the ribosome? Right, there's a structure. Okay, first there are a few very obvious difference. Okay, in terms of structure, you'll find that the mitochondria basically has an oval shape. It's oval shape and with a double membrane. Okay, you see that in plant cells too. In the mitochondria, they have a double membrane. Okay, whereas for the ribosomes, right, basically they are only small round particles with no internal structure. Okay, and then the size, yes, definitely the mitochondria will be larger, whereas the ribosome will be smaller. Okay, and then the presence of membrane, so it's quite obvious. So you can see that there's a membrane. The in the square, the yellowish light material. Okay, and it has a double membrane. Whereas for the ribosome, it doesn't have any membrane. It has no membrane, right? So it makes when you are given a diagram of a cell, it'll be quite easy for you to know which one is the mitochondria and which one is the ribosome. Okay, whereas the rest they are not structures, right? The nucleus is quite obvious. Is usually the biggest organelle in the cell, right? And the cytoplasm is simply just the jelly-like structure, and then they are covered by a cell membrane. Okay, so there are 5 parts in the animal cell structure. Okay, let's look at the plant cell structure, and then later when we see the difference, I think it will help us to remember, right, the difference or the similarities between the animal cell and the plant cell. Okay, so let's look at the diagram first again. Okay, there are similar organelle that is in the plant cell as in the animal cell, right? We can see the nucleus, right, is still the biggest organelle. Okay, maybe not in the plant cell, right? But we will see that it's circular, a nucleus, and we'll see the mitochondria, right? Mitochondria, the cytoplasm, the ribosome. Okay, and also the cell membrane, right? All this exists also in animal cells. Okay, but there's something more in the plant cells, right? First, I believe we all know, because plants contains chlorophyll, and basically these chlorophylls are made of what we call chloroplasts. Okay, and another difference is that plant cells, they have cell walls, and cell walls are rigid, right? So basically, you will preserve the shape of the plant cell. Whereas for animal cell, it doesn't have a cell wall, so there's a tendency when water through osmosis enter into the cell, the animal cell might burst. Okay, because it doesn't have a cell wall, a rigid cell wall to protect it. Okay, we'll come into more details in the later chapters on the animal cell. That means what happens when water enters into the animal cells through osmosis. And finally, in the plant cells, we note that there's this empty space, okay, or basically there's this quite a big space called velco, which holds sugar and salts, right? And in general, we call this the cell sac. Okay, so again, let me just go in detail. So basically, the plant cells contain the cell walls. It's important to know that they're made of cellulose, right? And this provides the structure and protection to the cell. Okay, and the velco, basically they hold the weak solution, that means a solution of sugar and salts. Okay, and there are chloroplasts, they are the site of photosynthesis, right? So chloroplast contains chlorophyll, and we know that chlorophyll basically is the green pigment that causes photosynthesis to happen, right, in the presence of light. Okay, and photosynthesis is how plants produce food. Okay, to help us remember, when we compare, right, in this diagram, I hope it will help you. So you can see what are the similar organelle that's both in plant cell and animal cell, right? Our cytoplasm, our nucleus, our ribosome, our mitochondria, our cell membrane. Okay, and what exists only in plant cells but not in animal cells, right? The chloroplast, the velco, and the cell wall. Okay, I hope by this we will be able to remember, right, the difference between animal cells and plant cells, and we can identify the organelles in the diagram, right? Especially, usually the question will ask you about the mitochondria versus the ribosomes, right? And from here you can see, right, the animal cell, this will be the mitochondria, right? Because it has excuse me. First, it's larger, okay, and second, it has membrane, double membrane. Okay, whereas this small ones will be the ribosomes. Okay, it doesn't have a membrane, it's smaller. Okay, and usually the circle one will be your nucleus. Right, and the jelly-like substance will be your cytoplasm. Okay, and the external will be your cell membrane. Okay, so I hope by this, you'll be able to recall anytime, anywhere, right, about the animal cell and the plant cells. So, okay, next, we will come to the bacterial cell. Okay, so in the IGCSE biology syllabus, right, you only need to know specifically, right, about animal cells, plant cells, and bacterial cells that you need to identify, right? So in the exam questions, when they ask you about the protoxis or the prokaryotes, okay, they will give you the diagram and they will tell you what cell it is, okay, what type of cell it is, and usually they only ask you to identify the mitochondria, the nucleus, or the ribosomes, or the cell walls. Okay, later we will do a recap on the structures of the cells for these 5 different, or these 2 other different groups of organisms. Okay, but first let's take a look at the bacterial cell. Excuse me. Okay, again, let's look at the diagram first, and then we'll try to see how is it similar to the animal cell or plant cell, and how is it different. Okay, so first we will see that something that is the same is that they have a cell. Oh, sorry, with the plant is that they have a cell wall. Okay, and also it contains cytoplasm. Okay, and something that maybe could be quite different is that instead of nucleus, right, the bacteria, they contain circular strain of DNA. That means the DNA is in circular strain. Okay, and it's slightly different from the protoxis. Later we'll see. Okay, and it also contains a circle, a loop-like or ring-like structure called the plasmid. Okay, this is something where we don't see in the plasmid. Is something we don't see in the animal cell and the plant cells. Okay, so let's look in detail. So bacteria doesn't have a nucleus, right? So their genetic material is free in the cytoplasm. Okay, and they have the circular strain of DNA. Okay, and they have the additional small rings of DNA called plasmids. Okay, while bacteria have a cell wall, cell membrane, but they don't have chloroplast like plants do. Neither do they have the mitochondria, right? And we know actually the mitochondria is the organelle in the cell that actually releases energy through respiration. Right. So in a way, we know that bacteria doesn't, or basically respiration doesn't happen in bacterial cells, right? Because they don't have the organelle called the mitochondria. Okay. And basically the the bacteria, they have the flagella, which are hair-like structures, right? That helps the bacterial cells to move. Okay, but we are more interested, or basically our focus is on the structures, right, of the bacterial cell. Okay. Okay, let's recall what we learned in lesson 1, right? The features of the organisms, where they are classified into 5 kingdoms. I only want us to focus on the cell structures, right? So we are quite familiar with the animal. Just now we went through in detail animals, plants, and the prokaryotes, right? And then now let's look at fungus or fungi. Okay. So first we know, right, fungi are mostly multicellular, okay? And they have cell walls, right? They are made of chitin. Okay, so we know now the fungi cells, basically they have cell walls. Okay, they are multicellular. Okay, and they do not photosynthesize, therefore they do not contain chloroplasts. Okay, but I think the key thing to remember is that they have fungi, right? They have cell walls. Later we will do one question on the on the unicellular fungi, which is the yeast. Okay. Okay, and we look at the prokaryotes. Okay, pardon me. Okay, basically first it is right. It's a bacterial cell, right? Is the bacterial cell. So basically we know there are no nucleus, and they have cell walls, but they are not made of cellulose. Okay, and finally, the protoxis, right? They are also mostly unicellular, right? And then some of them are animal-like, right? When we say animal-like, that means they will have the same cell structure as animals, right? Or if they are plant-like, then they will have similar or same cell structure as plants. Okay, so depending on basically if the question will is about the protoxis, they will actually tell you, right, whether it's an animal, is an animal like or is plant like. Right, then we just need to use the information that we know about animal cells or plant cells to answer the question. Okay, so this protoxis. So the thing maybe to remember again, where we didn't go in detail, is the fungi cell, right? They have cell walls. Okay, but they do not photosynthesize. Okay, and the biggest difference between all of them to the animal cells is that animal cells doesn't have cell walls, and this causes when animals, okay, or maybe for humans, okay, I believe you're aware, if you suddenly drink water or consume a lot of water within a very short period of time, right, you might face this problem where your cells burst. Okay, and it's all because as too much water enters into your cells, right? Without the cell structure, your cells have a tendency to burst or has a probability to burst, right? And this is quite dangerous. Okay, so this is something where if animals suddenly, in a very short period of time consume a lot of water, they have this danger where the cells will burst, and mainly because the animal cells doesn't contain cell wall. Okay, next, okay, now we know quite a lot about cells, but how does the cells reproduce? Or basically, how are the cells made? Right, and basically, new cells, they are made or produced by simply division of the existing cells. Right, and basically, that's how we grow, or how human grows, or how animals or plant grows. Right, it's simply the division of the existing cells. At the same time, if your cell is damaged, right, uh, the cells will divide and they repair, right? So basically, this is the basis. That means the division of the existing cells is the basis for growth, repair, and reproduction in all living organisms. Okay, there's something to note. And next, we come on to there are certain specialized cells that we need to know, right? As in humans, because these cells they perform specific functions in the body. Okay, we need to know 6 of them. First is the ciliated cells, right? And what it does, it actually moves the mucus in the trachea and the bronchia. Okay, the trachea and the bronchia is basically where our windpipe and our lungs are, right? So basically, this is the excretory system where how our body, right, exhale carbon dioxide. Basically, it's our airway. And basically, the ciliated cells, what they do, okay, they actually help to move the mucus. Okay, actually, the mucus will trap uh, maybe pathogens, okay, or germs, or even fine particles, right, from our airways, right, and move it, whether we spill it out or it went into the stomach, right? And the stomach, because it's very acidic, the acid will kill off the pathogens or the bacteria. Okay, so the ciliated cells, they have a very specific function. Okay, you need to know. We will come into more detail on the ciliated cells when we come to the excretory system, I think in chapter 14. Right? It's a very important cell to help us to protect our airways, or basically protect our lungs. Okay, next, the root hair cells. Okay, the root hair cells, okay, we it's not in animals, but mostly in plants. Okay, we see that the root hair cells, the functions they perform is that they absorb water and minerals. Right, so the cells, they're adapted and then they perform these special functions. Okay, and the other one, the next one that you need to know is the palisae mesophyll cells, right? The palisae mesophyll cells, and what do? Basically, they exist in plants and they are responsible for photosynthesis. We'll come to this again in transport in plants. I remember it's in chapter 6. Okay, the next one is neurons. The neurons where relay information in our body, in our nervous system, right? And basically how they do that is through the conduction of electric impulses, right? That's how information, like when our body receive a stimulus, right? Let's say I touch something hot, and then immediately the information is sent from the neurons to the nervous system, right? And then from the nervous system is relayed to the motor neuron, and then you create an automatic response. That's how when we touch something hot, immediately we'll withdraw, even without our brain telling us what to do. Okay, so this is in chapter 14 or 15, where we learn about coordination responses. Okay, but all this is done through the specialized cells, what we call neurons. Okay, the number 5 specialized cells you know is the red blood cells. And the red blood cells, they're responsible to transport, that means to move oxygen, transport oxygen through our body in the blood. Okay, and finally, the sperm and the egg cells, or the gametes, basically they are responsible for reproduction. Okay, so basically in the syllabus, you need to know about these 6 specialized cells, where you'll come to them in greater detail again in the later chapters. Okay, so for now, you just need to remember there's these 6 specialized cells and what are their functions. Okay, we're going to end this and then we're going to go on to a question. Okay, finally, for this section, right, we need to know about the levels of organization, right? So basically, when we have many cells, right, when they come together, when you have a group of similar cells working together to perform a specific function, we have something called a tissue, right? Because we always hear about, is it something wrong with the tissue, cell, or your organs, right? So now we can be more clear when we talk about a tissue, what it is, right? So for example, when we talk about the muscle tissue, right, in humans, right, basically it's just a group of similar cells working together, right, so that the muscles can expand or contract. Okay, and in plants, you have the xylem tissue, okay, where the xylem is responsible for transporting water in plants. We'll come to all this again in detail in the later chapters. Okay, so when you have a group of different tissues working together, what do you have? You have an organ, right? For example, our heart is an organ, so it will contain different parts. So when you have a group of tissues working together, we have an organ. Okay, and if you look at the diagram here, this will show you how the hierarchy structure of the organism is, right? Yeah, first, the basic unit is cells, right? And when you have a group of cells working together, you have tissues. Okay, when you have a group of tissue working together, you have an organ, right? And you have a group of organs working together, you have an organ system. And finally, when all the organ systems work together, you have a organism, or you have a living organism. So the one that we're most familiar with is ourselves, right? The human. So basically, we have different organ system, right? Our brain, our nervous system, our digestive system, uh, our excretory system, and so on and so forth. So all this come together and they work together. That's why we have the human as a living organism. Okay, so in more detail, the organ system, right, is just a group of organs working together to carry out the body functions. And we have the circulatory system, right, where the heart uh, pumps the blood, oxygenated blood in and move around the body. And we have the digestive system. It contains the stomach, intestines, the livers. All these will come into greater detail in the later chapters. Okay, so now it's simply just to know the overall brief picture. Okay, then finally we have the organism. Okay, where we have a living being made up of multiple organ systems working together. Okay, let me quickly go on to 2.2, the size of specimens. This is quite an easy one, so we will go through an example to understand, right? So first, you just need to know the formula for magnification. And it's quite easy, right? It's simply just the image size over the actual size. Then you have this factor called the magnification, right? The image size divided by the actual size. And the next thing you need to know about this, the size of specimens, is how do you convert micrometers into millimeters? And just if you remember, 1 millimeter equals to 1 micrometers. And then you just need to apply this in calculations, and that's all this subtopic that you need to know about this subtopic. So let's look at an example. It's from a past year paper, right? So how we can see this. Okay, so we can see a diagram of a human sperm cell, right? So first it will ask you, write the formula that will use to calculate the magnification of the diagram, right? And we know magnification is simply equals to the image size over the actual size. Okay, then the part 2, it asks the actual length of the sperm cell in the diagram is 0.05 millimeters, mm. Can you convert this value to micrometers? Yes, right? You just remember 1 mm equals to 1,000 micrometers. Right? You convert and you will have 55 in micrometers. So you multiply this by 1,000. So 1, 2, 3. Yeah, 55. Okay, 55 micrometers. Okay, we have the answer in the next page. Okay, the magnification formula, image size over actual size, right? And to convert this to micrometers, 1 millimeter equals to 1,000 micrometers. So 0.05 millimeters equals to 55 micrometers. Okay, so it's quite straightforward. Any one of you have problem with trying to calculate this, the magnification? Okay, if not, let's go on to do something. Yes, I think this is something that will be interesting to ask. Okay, let's look at this question. So now this is a baker's yeast. Okay, so it's a single cell organism, right? It's a yeast, so we know it is unicellular, right? Right. So and then it is classified in the kingdom fungi. Okay, we didn't learn in detail, right? That's why they will give you all this information. Right, and then this figure is a drawing of a section through a yeast cell. And then you have the A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, right? Where it labels the different parts of the yeast cell. Okay, so question 1. So can you type this answer in your chat? Can you state one other kingdom that contains organisms that all have structure A? So first you'll recognize what is structure A. So can you type in the chat what is structure A? Maybe first, type in the chat what is structure A and then state the other kingdom that contains organism that have structure A. Okay, Devin, can you see there's a chat button on the should be on the upper right hand side, upper right hand corner.
Oh, okay, Chair. Thanks, Chair. I was finding
Yeah.
for it.
Okay. Okay, good. Animal kingdom. Okay. Okay, maybe Jamuna, can you tell me what is structure A? Pardon me, I think I have a slight cough. Yeah. Jamuna, maybe you can tell me what structure A?
Structure is the nucleus.
Okay, why is it? Okay, it's at the outer, is here, right? The outer part.
Mm.
Okay, why is it the nucleus?
Oh,
You want to try again?
yeah.
Okay, no worries. Yeah, maybe I'll explain again. Okay, let's wait for Derwin. Okay, plant cell. Okay, Derwin, can you tell me what is structure A?
Is structure A cell wall, sir?
Yes, that's right. Okay, good. Okay, let me just explain why it's a cell wall, or maybe let me just explain what we learned earlier. Let me just bring out the eraser first. Oops, I rubbed off everything. Can I undo that? Okay, never mind. Let's leave with it. Okay, the structure that actually holds the cell, right, will be the cell wall, right? And there's a difference between the cell wall and the cell membrane, right? So cell wall, basically you see that there's a structure, there's a certain thickness. You can see there's a certain thickness. Whereas if it's an animal cell that doesn't have a cell wall, then you will see that there's only a membrane. Right? It doesn't have that layer, that structure, which is a cell wall. Right? The second circle that I draw is actually the cell wall. Right? Whereas the first circle, the inner circle, is actually the cell membrane. And we know plants contains both cell wall and cell membranes. Right? So this is the cell wall. The one that I color in, that I color it. Okay, I just color a part. Right? So this is the cell wall. Okay, just as a practice, can you tell me what G is? G. Can you type the answer? G. Okay, good. Jamuna, you want to try? What is G? Yes, nucleus, right? I think it's quite obvious, right? You can see it's maybe quite circular, and then usually you will see that there's something inside here. Okay, so another question. What other uh, organism in the five kingdoms that also have cell walls? Remember, we learned five kingdoms: animal kingdom, plants, fungi, prokaryotes, and the protoctes. Yeah, okay, yeah, prokaryotes. Okay, good. Okay, let's continue to the part 2, question 2. It will help us to identify more of the cell structure. Okay, so now can you complete table 1 by naming the cell structure responsible for each cell function and give the letter that identifies each cell structure in figure 1.1. So the storage of genes, can you type the answer and then the letter from figure 1, the storage of genes. Yeah, which cell, what's the name of the cell structure that stores the genes? Yes, good. Nucleus. Yeah, and it's G, right? Good, good. Then what about the aerobic respiration? Which cell structure is responsible for aerobic respiration? And where is it? Yes, good. Yeah, the mitochondria. And can you tell me which letter is the mitochondria? Okay, good. Yes. Okay, very good. I think you all understand this very well. Okay, then finally, the amino acids are assembled to make protein. What is the cell structure? What's the name of the cell structure? Yes. And then what's the letter? Okay, good. Very good. Okay. Okay, let me show you. Or maybe let me first ask you, are there another structure in the cell that we see in diagram 1.1 besides H that is also a ribosome? Besides H. Yes. Yes, very good. I think you're well done. Okay, then can you quickly tell me what's the name of D? What's the name of the cell structure D? Yes. Okay, the cytoplasm. Okay, very well. Yeah. Okay, so we know F is also the ribosome, right? You will see, yeah, they are small, just like the it's quite different from H, which is also ribosome, but it is the small dots of the ribosomes that are somehow connected together. Okay. Okay, very good. Okay, part B. So a student make a drawing of one of the okay, how do I pronounce this Latin name? Escherichia coli bacterium. Okay, it's a bacteria. And then figure 1.2 allows the students or shows the students drawing. And the actual length of this bacterial cell is 2 micrometer. Can you convert the actual length of the cell to millimeters? Can you type out the answer in the chat? Okay, good. Good, Jamuna. Okay, now we come to the part C of this question. So basically, it asks you to describe similarities and differences between the structure of the yeast cell and the structure of the bacterial cell. And then you use the information in figure 1.1 and figure 1.2 in your answer. I'll give you the answer, but I want to share with you. So sometimes, how do we answer such questions in exam? So the first thing to look is how many marks is allocated. Right? So in this case, 6 marks is allocated, right? That means you must take 6 points. Right? And then the keyword is describe. Right? So you need to describe the similarities and differences. Okay, I'll show you the answer immediately. Okay, so earlier, okay, sorry, this is already the fungus. So this is the answer. In the next page, you can find the answer, right? The other kingdom, it could be plant or it could be the prokaryotes. Okay, and then the cell function, right? Nucleus, CSG, the mitochondria, E, the ribosome could be H and F, and then the actual length of the cell to millimeters is 0.002. Okay, then the next page, you see the answer. Okay, so usually if it's 6 marks, first we need to know it must be 6, it must be 6 points. But can I just put all 6 points on similarities? No. Okay, so basically the guideline usually they will say maximum 4 in the marking scheme, maximum 4 from similarities and maximum 4 from differences. So the best, if you can remember, you just give 3 each. Then you will get your 6 points safely. Okay, so you can choose any 3 or 4 from the similarities. So we know, right, the similarity between yeast cell and bacterial cell. First, they are unicellular. Okay. They have cell walls, right? Based on the diagram, we actually know, right? They have cell walls. They have cytoplasm. They have ribosomes, right? They have cell membranes, and they all both have DNA or genetic material. So just any of the 4, and right, you will get the 4 marks here. So if you have 4 here, then you just need to give 2 here. Differences, right? The differences. Okay, so the thing to know is that if you give 6 marks and you ask you to describe the similarities and differences, don't give all in similarities or give all in differences. Right? The best is even 3. But usually in marking scheme, they will allow up to 4. Okay, so the differences are, okay, bacteria have no nucleus. Right? Yeast, yes, they have a nucleus. Right? Actually, you can see from the diagram too, right? If you remember the diagram, right? The yeast, they have a nucleus. Okay, so that's what I'm saying. The syllabus only require you to remember and identify the cell structures in animal cells, plant cells, and bacterial cells. Right. So if they ask you questions that is from the fungi or the fungus cell or the prototyst cell, they will give you the diagram. Okay, so you can find don't be worried when you see diagrams or they start asking you on like fungi on the prototyst cell. When you say, "Oh, I didn't remember," don't worry, they will give you the information. So you just look at the question carefully. Right. So in this question, right, from the diagram, you'll know, right, the yeast have nucleus, bacteria doesn't have a nucleus. Okay, and something that we know about bacteria that we need to know in detail is that the DNA, right, is a loop or is a ring or is circular, right? Whereas the yeast, their DNA is linear. So even if you don't know this, it's fine because you still have so many things that you can just tell from the diagram, right? First, we know bacteria has no the mitochondria, right? The yeast, they have, right? And earlier, you can see in the yeast, there's actually a velcro. Okay, maybe let me just go back to the diagram again. Can you see? This is the velcro. C is the velcro. Right, so actually, this is a gift question. It's a question that gives you mark if you are able to, read the question carefully. Right. So you already from the diagram, you already give up 3 differences, right? No nucleus. Bacteria, no mitochondria. Bacteria, no velcro. And the others that if you can remember from memory, then you know, yes, bacteria that they have plasmids, right? Whereas yeast doesn't have. Okay, and if you remember, in bacteria, they have no membrane bounded. That means the cell structures, they are not membrane bounded. Okay, okay, and one of these such structures is actually your mitochondria, right? The membrane bound cell structures are your mitochondria. Okay, so even if you don't know all, you can't remember the plasmids, you can't remember the shape of the DNA in bacteria, which is a loop or ring, right? Just by looking at the diagram alone, you already have be able to identify the nucleus, the mitochondria, the velcro. Right. So isn't this free marks for you in the exam? Yeah. This question is actually a question in paper 4 June 21. Okay. Let's look at the final question before we end the class. So again, so we see this iguana, the Galapagos iguana. Okay, and this is the genus, and this is the species, right? Okay, first the question asks you, can you state 2 features that are used to classify animals as reptiles, right? What are the 2 features that we use in chapter 1, right? That we can identify this animal as a reptile. Can you give it a try? Yeah. Jamuna and Derwin. Yeah, can you type the answer on the chat? Ah, good. Okay, that's 1. Okay, that will be 2. Okay. Okay. Okay, that will be 2. Okay, then part 2, maybe I'll let Derwin answer. So Derwin, part 2, can you state 2 features that are present in plant cells that are not present in the cells of reptiles? Ah, okay, very good. Yes, I think you have a very good grasp of the of this chapter 1 and 2. Okay, good. So I just go to the answer. Right. Yes, they have dry, scaly skin, cold-blooded. Okay, another thing about the reptiles is that they have leathery, soft shell eggs. Okay, their eggs. The eggs are leathery. Right? All reptiles, basically their eggs are leathery. Okay, and any 2 from above, right? Plant cells, they have cell walls, they have chloroplasts, they have velcros, right? Whereas reptile we recognize is from the animal kingdom. So animal cells do not have the above. Okay, let me just quickly go back to the learning outcomes to make sure indeed that we have remembered and studied all this. Okay, so I'm quite sure you all are able to describe and compare the structure of a plant cell with an animal cell, even up to the point where you can identify in diagrams. Okay, the next, we actually know how to describe the structure of a bacterial cell, right? We can identify them in a diagram. And one thing that is unique, that's unique in the bacterial cell is that they have circular DNA and they have plasmids. Right? Plasmids are smaller DNA loops or smaller rings of DNA. Okay, and then third, we will explain the functions of major cell structures, right, and recognize their roles in living organisms. Okay, for example, what does the mitochondria do? Right, basically is where the respiration happens, right, and then energy is released to the cell. And what's the function of the nucleus? Right, is where the DNA is stored, right, and it controls the cell. Right, it's like the brain of a human. And then, like, what's the function of the cell wall? Right, basically, it's the structure of the cell. It keeps the structure of the cell and protects the cell. Okay, and then fourthly, we identify what are the specialized cells, right? The 6 of them. The ciliate cells basically is what excuse me. Okay, is where the function is to move the mucus, right, in the trachea and the bronchia, right? It's basically where our breathing, our lungs, the breathing pipe is, right? So they move the mucus out when the mucus traps the pathogens or the particles. Okay, it protects the lungs. And we have the root hair cells, basically it's in plants, where they absorb water and minerals, right? Siliate cells, root hair cells, palisade, mesophyll cells, neurons, red blood cells, and our sperm and egg cells. Right? I think all these, not to worry, because in the later chapters, you will come to learn them in greater detail, and you use them again, right? And you'll be used to identify them when you come to that specific chapter, right? For example, the palisade mesophyll cells, when you learn about transport in plants, right? You will be asked to identify again in the plants. Okay, and also root hair cells in plants. Okay, so not to worry. And then number 5, so we know what is the difference between the tissue, a cell, an organ system, and the organism, right? And we know they have this hierarchy structure, right? That means the cell is the basic structure of all living organism. And when you have a group of when you have a group of cells working together, you have a tissue. When you have a group of tissue working together, you have an organ. When you have a group of organ working together, you have an organ system. And we have a group of organ system working together, and that's what forms the living organism. Right? Okay. And then finally, the easiest one is simply we remember what magnification is. Sorry, let me just go back to the right, the magnification, right? It's very simple. Just remember the formula for magnification is just the image size over the actual size. And the next thing you remember is what is 1 mm? How many micrometers is 1 mm? It's 1,000. And I can see you all can do that, but not to worry. In the next lesson, I will give you all questions on this to do as homework. Okay, so I'll give you homework the next lesson. Okay, then after that, on the 4th lesson, I will give you a short quiz where you need to do. Okay, yeah. Any questions before I end the lesson?
No.
Okay, thanks, Jamina. Okay. Derwin, there's something I need to update you. Are you there?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So after you finish this class, when you log in again, you will see
Okay.
the icon on the right side of your dashboard, which shows past class. So you click
Okay.
past class, and then you'll be able to see the recording of this lesson and also the notes under this, what we call the review class.
Oh, okay. Okay, sir.
You can
Okay.
access them anytime, anywhere.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. That's if you have no questions, yeah, I'll end the lesson now. I'll see you again next Monday.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you. Yeah. Bye. Jamina,
Bye.
Derwin. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye, sir.